Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live, episode 104. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain, and we're here tonight with Noah Waisberg of Kira Systems. And our co-host for this evening is a former guest and startup founder of Justice Text, Devshi Mehrotra. Welcome, both of you. Thank you both for being here tonight. And let me introduce Noah for those who are unfamiliar. I know that most of my legal tech community is familiar with Noah and his work at Kira Systems, but prior to co-founding Kira Systems, Noah practiced at the law firm of Weil Goetschel in New York, where he focused on private equity, M&A, and securities. Noah is an expert on contract analysis, legal technology, and artificial intelligence. Has spoken at conferences including South by Southwest Interactive, ILTACON, and reInvent Law, and has been named the Financial Times Intelligent Business Market Shaper and ILTA's Innovative Thought Leader of the Year. Noah holds a JD from NYU School of Law and an AM from Brown University, also a BA with honors from McGill University, and most recently has added author to his list of accomplishments. Noah, thanks for being here. I know that a bio doesn't quite cover everything. Tell us a little bit about your startup journey, especially from I'm practicing law and how Kira came to be.
Great. So first off, thanks for having me on. It's good to be on here. Startup journey was once upon a time, I used to be a corporate lawyer. And there were a lot of things I really liked about that job. I really liked my coworkers. I really liked a lot of my clients. I really liked the challenge of the work that I was getting to do. But it wasn't what I felt like doing forever. And I kept sort of coming back to this idea of just like me, and then like as I got more senior people that I was supervising, just spent so much time doing work that we didn't seem well suited to do, right? So just thinking about junior corporate lawyers spending vast amounts of time doing work that like they hated, that they screwed up, that was like highly repetitive, that it didn't seem like you needed to have gone to like NYU or Harvard or Yale to do. And the clients like really weren't that enthusiastic about paying for it. And you're doing all that, like we're talking back in my day at a mere $350 an hour, right? And it's like well more than that now. And that was sort of pretty annoying as a junior to go through this stuff. Like, while I enjoyed some of the work that I had to do, there was like definitely lots of times you're like, why am I doing this stuff? Or why am I supervising people who are doing this stuff? And that was like unfun, but it also felt like opportunity. Like it seemed very unsustainable that things were going to stay that way forever. So eventually, again, driven by this idea that this wasn't what I felt like doing for the rest of my life, even though I was relatively happy in the job in a lot of ways and like comfortably paid and all that stuff, I quit. And I just sat and thought for like 6 months and just thought about whether I should try to get a job in an existing company because I felt like I had a lot to learn. That feeling has not gone away. But I also kind of was thinking about whether there was a way to take advantage of that idea that I had around junior corporate lawyers spending vast amounts of time doing work that they shouldn't. And I had like been thinking about one idea when I left the firm, realized it was like, I think would still be a useful thing to build, but it just wasn't going to be a great business, like a huge business. And then I started thinking about another thing, which actually some people have built like reasonably good businesses of. But it also like, it just didn't like, it wasn't something I had to do, but then started thinking about contracts. And I realized that contract review fit the theory really well, right? That number one, it was a hugely high volume task. So 30 to 60% of the cost of most M&A deals, like the legal fees associated with most M&A deals, is due diligence. And most of that is contract review. And like, it wasn't just in M&A deals that this was happening, but like that's what we were most focused on, number one. Number two, that even at the world's best firms, that people made mistakes at this work like all the time. Like I think most people have had the experience of being a mid-level or senior associate, have had the experience of like, it's Thursday night, it's like 10 o'clock, you start reviewing the junior's work on his diligence report that's due the next day, and you realize that they did not realize that a direct or indirect assignment is a change of control. And it's like, it's going to be a long night, right? Like, and that's the stuff that you catch, but like there's presumably lots of mistakes that sort of make it through as well. So number one, high volume. Number two, mistakes getting made with status quo in a world that's not very tolerant of mistakes. And then number three, realizing that people were often looking through contracts for the same things over and over again, right? Like there are situations when you're reviewing a contract and you're thinking about like, is this a good contract for my company to sign? Like, is this a good contract for me to sign? But there's a lot of situations where it's just like these contracts exist, like it just, and you just need to pull data out of them, right? Like they're like these unstructured pieces of sort of documents, and they have a ton, like hundreds of data points of information in them. And there's just situations when you need to know that information. So like in an M&A context, it's like, can I do a change of control? Or, you know, maybe back last March, it was like, what happens if people don't deliver to me because their factory's shut? Or I need to shed costs immediately. Like, can I terminate my contracts for convenience? Or like, if I terminate them, what's the fee? Or, you know, I'd like to put customer logos on my website. What do my contracts say about publicity rights? Like, there's just tons of times when people have to get at that information, and you're looking for the same things over and over again across a pool of contracts. And because people were looking for the same things over and over again, our idea was that you might be able to build software to help people find that stuff and pull it out. So back in January 2011, I got together with my co-founder, Dr. Alexander Hudak. Alex has a PhD in comp sci from the University of Waterloo, which is like the MIT of Canada, for lack of a better description. And so we thought, from talking with Alex and other guys with Waterloo comp sci PhDs, that it was going to take us like 4 months to harness the state of the art in machine learning and apply it to this problem. And so we're like, well, it'll take us like 4 months to build the software, or 4 months to build the software and then 6 months to raise money. And then we get to build the software after that. And we're like, let's just like build the software and then we can raise money afterwards.
I'm sure Devshi's going to have questions on that front and soon enough for you.
Well,
but
you know, pluses and minuses to
sure.
Like, one of the recurring themes is that there's just trade-offs, right?
Right.
So anyways, we did that. But what we found about 6 months later was that it turns out that our view of what the state of the art was just wrong, right? That you couldn't get the software to be accurate using the state of the art techniques. And so we had to do a whole bunch of like original research to get it to work. And at that point, Alex wasn't sure if we had like 3 more months or 10 years to get the software to work. And we didn't think that was going to make a super compelling pitch, right? Like go to a VC and be like, sometime in the next 10 years, we'll get this software work and it's going to make lawyers like faster at their work. Like we thought might be a hard pitch. And so we didn't even really try to make it. Like we just kept our heads down and kept working for like the next few years, which was a hard time. Like we had our first kid during that time, and it just like, you know, my wife was like, go back to work, like not super happy with me. But life went on. And eventually we actually got the software to work well.
What year was that in that you finally got the software working well? Because I've been following you. It's got to be 5 or 6 years that I've been following Kira. So when did it really start working for you?
It was like probably working. It was like working pretty well in about like mid 2013.
Okay.
And sort of like the distinction was like prior to that time. So you have like these 2 problems. One, you got to get the software to work, and number 2, you got to get lawyers to try it, right? So you spend like 3 months trying to get someone to just try the software for free, right? And eventually they'd try it, and like inevitably, like, you know, the system would collapse or something awful like that, right? We got like very rigorous on quality checking in those days because it was just so frustrating to spend like 3 or 6 months trying to get someone to try the software, and then they'd try the software and like it'd be down or something. And so we got like a lot more anal about quality checking on our side during that time, because it was just so crushing to spend all that time trying to get someone to use the software and then have it fail. But by about 2013, we got it to the point where people would try the software and they'd be like, can I use that again? And that was huge. They hadn't yet started to pay us, but like they were interested in using it again. And that was like just like a very big deal. And eventually they started to pay us here and there and use it on like projects, and like it was good. And we started getting like a little bit of revenue, I think in like November 2013, which was a big deal, because then if people asked you if you had revenue, you could say yes, even though we had like $2,000 of revenue, right? And then we got like a second place to pay us, and then it's like, yes, we have revenue from multiple clients,
right?
Right, like very like true phrasing, but it was hard. And then summer 2014, we'd long kind of had this idea that like one of the big objections that we got was, well, the software only finds the stuff that you've taught it to find, and like, what if I need to find something else? And so we'd be like, oh, we can build it for you really quickly. We had like this big client and we did that for them. And then it was just like, they'd be like, yeah, sure. Right. And I remember there was like a large opportunity that we tried to sell in late 2013, where we were trying to explain to them how like machine learning worked and building stuff, and it just like didn't work. And then there was like this stretch where Alex kind of went away for a while. Like I just didn't hear from him, like not exactly, but for like a few weeks. And he came back and he's like, just try this. And it was like this thing where people could teach the software. So around summer 2014, it was like this thing where people could teach the software themselves, and to find new concepts and contracts. And that was still a task that I was spending a vast amount of time doing. And I just got it, and it was like, oh, this is amazing. And I smiled for like the next 3 months. And the first like 3 places that tried it, like all signed up and bought it. And it was like, it was great, right? Like it was just really transformative. And that summer we went, we also had like a large, like basically a big 4 firm that, not a law firm, that came to us, and we had tried to sell them back in 2013, didn't really work. But then when they tried this, they were like, oh, this is cool. And they ended up licensing our software. And we went from being like 4 people with sporadic revenue that summer to like 8 people by the end of the year, to like 20 people by the end of 2015. And then in later 2015, early 2016, we really started to connect on selling to larger law firms. We spent some of the money that we got in 2014 on hiring out like 2 excellent salespeople and 2 excellent marketing people. And like the combination of those 4, plus like others of us working at it, just like really started to figure out, especially those 4 though, really started to figure out how to sell to large law firms in a repeatable way. And
sounds like you started to get a rhythm at that point, right?
Yeah, like we just figured out, yeah, that's it. And then by the end of 2016, we were like probably 30, 35 people. And then 2017 was like just this great year. We like really did very well that year. And by summer 2018, we were still bootstrapped through this whole time. Summer 2018, we crossed over 100 people. And we decided to take in some outside capital. We didn't actually need it at that time, right? Like we'd already grown really quickly. We had like surplus money, but our thinking was that number one, just the economy even back then felt a little shaky. And we were like, I don't know, like we think this will be okay. Like we can tell a story about how our software will work well in a recession, but we don't know. Number one. Number two, it just like, so we felt like having a bit of a cushion. Number two, we just felt like de-risk in a related way, de-risking things in the company and for ourselves, right? Like you realize kind of like, I don't know, like my salary has never, like I had 0 salary until like November 2014, I think. And then like my co-founder and I went up to like a $60,000 a year Canadian salary. And I think now we're sitting at like $100,000 Canadian, right? So it was like this thing where, I don't know, like.
So it wasn't, it wasn't overnight success. That
no, well, in the early days.
Clear.
Yeah, well, like we had people that we were paying more than that, right? But
right.
in the early days, it was kind of my co-founder and I were like, well, if we each take a lower salary, we can hire like one other person, and like we could really use that one other person. And then eventually it was like, like now I think we're I believe well below the average salary in the company. But like there's people who make more than, but there's a lot of people who make more than us. And like that's fine, right? Like it's not, we're not here for the salary. But it was something where like, it made sense for us on a de-risking on a personal level. And then the third thing was just that we thought it'd be really great to be able to invest more in the product and the go-to-market. And the fourth thing that we did not think about when we were sort of going out to talk to investors, but became something that we realized was really valuable, is like the investors themselves add value. Like they see these companies all the time, and like for us, we were lucky to get to work with Insight, who are like a really good quality investor and have just like I have learned a lot from them and just really appreciated my relationship with them.
You've given us a ton of
Yes,
that
that's
startup.
that was like a monologue. I'm sorry.
That was a great, yeah. I mean, there's so much there, and probably plenty to unpack. But I know Devshi, who's newer to the space, has got probably. I hope that was helpful in some respects, Devshi. He's obviously given this discussion before. I think you've got your
you have this thing where you end up having to tell that story. It's like, I was sitting there. There was like a time when I was getting really frustrated with this, and then someone brought me to a concert by The Who, and I was sitting there watching like, Pete Townsend or like on stage, and he's like, they're like playing the same songs that they've literally been playing since like the 1970s. And it's like, oh, woe is me. I've had to tell this story for like a few years, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
they're like, give us the Baba O'Reilly, give us that,
But
right? So it's like, I think you end up having to tell the story a lot. And it's actually like one strong recommendation to all the founders out there is like really put some work into it. Like I had to do a major presentation back in 2013 to like a large corporate, had like their outside counsel forum and had me speak at it. And I got my dad talked me into getting a voice coach, like a speech coach for it. And I think I dropped like $300 on like 2 sessions with this lady. And it was great because she basically ended up polishing up that story and a couple other things and my delivery of it. And you end up saying it like there could be weeks where I end up having to tell it like 4 times, right? To like some new employees, to
so it made it more
customers.
succinct and better delivery, maybe.
Yeah, like you just should think about like with everything you're doing, like just
Yeah.
are there things you're gonna have to do a lot, and like can you systematize it? And definitely your company story is worth getting like an outside professional to help you with, and it's not that much money, and I think it has paid dividends.
Devshi, with all that kind of background on Kira Systems, please ask a question. I know you're having some of these experiences.
I feel like I have a dozen questions. I think the first one though that really jumps out is it's really cool to actually see a lot of Canadian universities, particularly like the computer science departments, be leaders in the legal tech space, legal machine learning. And one thing I've noticed is there's not a lot of labeled data out there that can help, legal tech applications really get off the ground. So I'd love to hear in your experience when you were dealing with all this unstructured contract data and you were trying to figure out how to make predictions, how to, I guess, extract keywords, entities, things like that. Did you personally, did the company invest in creating a lot of that training and data in the first place? Or, what resources did you lean on?
Yeah, no, I like literally my job from like 2011 till like probably 2012, 2013, like until we started to sort of get people on the software, like probably 80 or 90% of my job was creating training data.
Really?
If I was doing it again, I don't know if it might have been more efficient to like hire people to do that, but actually having hired people to do it, I'm glad I did it myself. Like I could guarantee the quality. It really gave me like a great understanding of what was in contracts and like that problem. And for the first bunch of years, my co-founder and I spent like just a vast amount of time working together with me explaining to him like, oh, like it's not working here, and like, can you do something about, like, you have the stop item is a period, but like there's times in legal writing when it's a semicolon, and can we do something about that? And it was just like, my co-founder and I were so immersed in that problem that like it took us 2.5 years to solve the technical problem. But like, in fact, I think we were actually like lucky that it only took us 2.5 years. Like it could have taken us longer. So I created it, and I think it was good. Like the critical problem that we had to solve in 2011, 2012, 2013 was just like getting the software to work. And the fact that we put in all that work meant that like now, and like then in 2016, we'd sort of go head to head with competitors. And like we won, right? Like our software worked. Like there were times when there were trials. Like if you're in a successful area, like if you're in a promising area, you're going to have competitors, and it's actually like a positive thing. Even though like at first you're kind of like, and even sometimes you're like, like it really is a good thing to be working in an area where there are other people working, and like people are going to test your software against those competitors, and like you need your software to win. And for me, like working in that, creating the training data, I think was an element that helped us win. Obviously, there were a lot of other elements that helped us win. Like I think we had really good machine learning. We had like nice user interface. We had like really strong sales and marketing people helping do it. Like there were a lot of ways that we won. And then like once you start to win, it kind of builds upon yourself. Right. But anyways, we created the training data ourselves.
Very quick question, quick follow-up on that. I guess when you as the CEO migrated out of a lot of that training data creation, did you outsource that information or that process at any point?
Nope. We as a company, like I'm not knocking on outsourcing as a tactic. I think it's like totally a legit way to do it, but it's not something that we've ever, like we've tried outsourcing a couple things, but we basically don't. No, we still today have like a whole team of lawyers. It took us a while to figure out how to build out that team right, like a couple attempts to get that right. But no, we got a whole team of like super high quality lawyers who teach Kira to find new information. And then our customers now are able to teach Kira too, right? So it isn't just us who teaches Kira now. I think our customers have trained sort of more than 10,000 data, more than like 10, 20,000 data points inside Kira. Oh, so wow. There's like a lot, I can't recall the stat just off the top of my head, but there's like really a lot of stuff that customers have trained at. We've trained, say, like 1,200 data points, and customers have trained, again, I think it's 10 or 20. I feel like it's 20. I'm off my game, or I'd remember it. But like we have that, but we don't outsource that. There is some data creation actually that we do outsource, like some stuff around like, if it's like really simple, like there's some stuff our machine, like we have like a whole research team of computer science PhDs and some people supporting them. And they'll sometimes outsource some like really simple training data creation. Like if it was like kind of like identifying like periods or something like that, like they might outsource that.
No, in your first, because you bootstrapped it all, it sounds like for 6 or 7 years. What do you think was, can you give us like maybe your 2 top obstacles during that time? Was it starving founder? Was it, what were maybe your 2 biggest obstacles from say 2011 to 2017?
So different problems at different times, right? Okay. Like period up until about 2014, like 2013, it was just getting the tech to work, right? Okay. Like that was the problem. Like it was the only real problem. Like 90% of our focus was on getting the tech to work. After in the 2014 to 2016 era, 2013 to 2016 era, it was getting people to pay us money, right? Like just like actually getting revenue. And that's actually like there are pluses and minuses to bootstrapping. One of the real pluses is it very focuses you on getting money from customers. And like in both eras, I think you got to think about like I think it's really easy to distract yourself as a startup. And like we saw this with competitors where like their website was kind of like, looked like it was set up more for investors than it was for their audience, right? Like their explainer video was like, you have contracts and like you need to review them, right? Whereas ours was like, you're doing an M&A deal and you need to pull out change of control. Like it was like very targeted at our core users, because that's all we were trying to do was like find those core users, get them to use our software, get them to pay us money. And I think that like singular focus was very helpful for us.
Excellent. Devshi?
Yeah. I have a lot of questions about the company building process, but I saw something on your website. That seems to be a more recent development. I'd love to hear about Kira's partnership with Campaign Zero. That just seemed very.
Oh yeah, that was super cool. So like in June, I think like many people, we were just thinking about like, is there anything we could do to help? And
this is during the social unrest.
Yeah, during the Black Lives Matter sort of protests. We were like, like a lot of people, we were just paying attention to that and thinking about like, is there anything we can do to contribute here? And one of our sales guys, or actually I think like a friend of one of our sales guys, heard, I think it was like the Ringer podcast, and this guy DeRay McKesson, who's like an activist, like a sort of celebrity act, like a serious, like I say it not in like a disparaging way, but kind of like a pretty prominent activist around Black Lives Matter and police violence, was on as a guest, and he's getting interviewed, and they're like, the host was like, if someone gave you $250,000 today, what would you do with that money? And in fact, like I think they ended up getting like millions of dollars to it, like, or I don't know, like they did very well, rightly, with donations, because it's cool org. And he was like, oh, easy. I would immediately spend it on just hiring people to review contracts, like these police union contracts for us. Because it turns out one thing Campaign Zero, like what Campaign Zero had done is, I think DeRay had been like a union negotiator for the Baltimore School Board or some like school district or something like that. And he realized that like these union contracts with teachers like were really important in terms of drive behavior, and started to think the same thing about police union contracts. And there were some other activists who were thinking the same thing. And so they started to like put in all these freedom of information requests to get police union contracts and law enforcement officer bill of rights, which are, I guess, probably were public, but like legislation that also contains protections for police officers. And what they found was that like police officers had these protections that normal people didn't have, right? So one example of that is something dubbed like the 48-hour rule, right? So after an incident, a lot of the times there's like a contractual thing that police officers get, like can't be questioned for 48 hours after an incident happens. And like, interestingly, when some researcher went and sort of like asked a whole bunch of police detectives, like, if you couldn't have access to a suspect for 48 hours, would that be like, would you feel good about that or not? And all the detectives were like, no, not at all. Like that'd be terrible, right? But actually for police officers, like they had that protection. And so what Campaign Zero did, and one of the things that, so anyways, DeRay really felt like hiring people to read these contracts. And he was like, I may like go on the Today Show in the morning, but like I literally am finishing every night, like reviewing a contract, and we're just not going fast enough. And for them, it was really important that they get this information out, because there was so much attention focused on the problem of police sort of violence over the summer, that they knew that they had to like seize the moment, and they weren't going quickly enough. And so like literally I heard this podcast, it was like a Sunday, so sales guy sent it to me on like Sunday. I listened to it on Sunday night, and like at 11:30 p.m. I emailed DeRay McKesson, and I was just like, hey man, like I heard you saying this, like we got technology that most of the world's top law firms use to pull data out of contracts. Like if we can help, we're very happy to help for free. And he like by like 11:45, I had an answer from him, and he was like, yes, like this would be amazing. Can we talk tomorrow morning? And so it turned out there were a whole bunch of Kirans who were like really enthusiastic about contributing as well, like helping out on this. And so something where we were able to get them up to speed and like get them going. And I think they felt that the software helped them complete this task a lot quicker. And so it was like really just cool. And we weren't actually planning on getting any publicity out of it either. Like our perspective on it was like, just, this is something we feel like doing because it's like a good cause and it's something we can do to help. As it turned out, like we got some publicity out of it and like, that's great, but like that wasn't why we were doing it. The one thing I'd note is I think there are, like as a company, we sort of believe that the world would make better decisions if they had data about their contracts. And so like most of the time we're thinking about enterprises, right? Like, you know, like a bank or like a shoe company, but maybe even a government would make better decisions. But I think there's like just a lot of times when as a society we would. And so some of the times that's, and so like what we would like people to do and what we really admire with Campaign Zero is just that they, like, while they have a take on it, they're not really, they're pretty neutral with how they put out the data, right? Like they do actually seek to just put out data on what's in these police union contracts. And if the people who are like, you know, like if you think that the 48-hour rule is a good thing, like the data's out there, right? Like you can argue for it with the data, like they're just putting the data out there. And we think that like the world would be healthier, like in this pretty polarized time, especially in the States. Like I'm Canadian, so fortunately it's a little less bad here, but in the States, like things are a bit more polarized, it appears. And in this time, like I think data could be a really good way to kind of get around that. And like we can just look at that. And so for us, like our take on it is like if there's other organizations, like we allow universities and like professors free access to Kira. And if there are other organizations, even if like they don't necessarily line up exactly with our political beliefs, like we were very pro supporting them, right? So for example, if someone felt like going through teacher union contracts and like they weren't a liberal, like that would be okay. Like we could be supportive of that too, because we think that the overarching thing is like just people putting out data is really important to us, and we'll all make better decisions if there are data, even if they're like not the decisions you might kind of argue for without the data.
That's really
anyway.
great.
Yeah,
Really great
cool. It was
story
like,
of the use of contracts for social purposes. That's really interesting. So tell us, a friend of yours or a colleague of ours, Jason Moyes, was on not too long ago.
yeah.
And he said, he's like, you got to ask him about that. He bootstrapped it to 100 people, which you've already covered. So at what point did you decide, okay, it sounds like you talked about doing some de-risking for yourself when you decided to take on money. What were the decisions like in seeking funding? When did you know you should seek it? And then what decisions were you making around how much you wanted to receive?
Well, so like I mentioned when we were going through it, right? Like piece number one was just thinking about like, you know, possible recession coming. So it'd be good to have some money in the bank. Number two, de-risk on a kind of business and individual level.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, have some more capital to like just be a bit more aggressive on building. And then number four, bring these investors in. What I've done and I recommend to people is like basically like the way the world is right now, like interest rates are really low. So lots of money flows into
Assets.
like alternative asset classes,
Mm-hmm.
like venture capital and stuff like that. And what you'll find is if you're a business, especially if you're a business that like has some evident traction, like you'll start to get a really large volume of reach outs, right? Like your problem is not meeting a VC. Okay. Like it's just like actually the spam that I was getting was basically like, you know, junior associates at like venture capital firms and growth equity firms just reaching out to me. And what I did, like for a while, I kind of ignored that. And then I was like, you know, what I should do is, even though we're not really raising and I'm crazy busy, I should just get to know some of these places. And so what I did is I set aside like an hour every Thursday afternoon, 4 to 5, like 2 30-minute blocks. And I just had my assistant like book me in like 2 of these meetings during that hour. And I kind of kept a spreadsheet where it was like, you know, fund, like who I spoke to, the fund size, the average check size, like their differentiators as a fund, what they looked for, and any other notes. And I probably triaged out about 2/3 of the places. Like, kind of like my thinking was like, well, if I got like, you know, Coastal Adventures or like Sequoia or like places like that reaching out to me, I probably like, and they're sounding kind of excited about what we're doing, I probably don't need to talk to everyone, right? Like I can just kind of in the same way, like if you're a US student, like, you know, if you got the test scores to get into like an Ivy
Sure.
League school, you don't need to look at every school, right? But you should look at like those types of schools. And so I started to talk to them, and just for an hour a week, but I wouldn't do it if I was traveling. And so it meant like some people would email me and I wouldn't get to talk to them for like 3 months, but they don't care, right? Like everybody's fine. And then you do follow-up calls with some of these people. And what I found and then when we eventually were ready to go to market, it meant like I had like a much greater sense of like who we were interested in working with. And with Insight specifically, like they really stood out to us over the process. Like I found almost all the calls with the different places were like pretty standard. Like they give me 5 minutes on their fund, and it's like, it sounds relatively similar. And then you'd spend like 15 minutes telling the Kira story, which you heard earlier. And then like they'd ask some questions for the remaining like 10 minutes, and the questions tended to be the same. And I found with Insight, they had some other investments around contracts, or like one other large investment around contracts. And the people that I was talking to on there were really like, I was learning from them. And that was like a very different dynamic. And it just really impressed me. And I was just dealing with the junior people at that point. But I'm like, the junior people are like this good. Like the more senior people got to be really good. And that turned out to be the case when I got to know the more senior people. And we actually ended up taking a lower valuation from them to work with them. Like in the end, our kind of thinking on it was like, the funding round is just kind of like a step on the journey, and the thing that you really care about is the exit. And so if we think that working with, not that the other investors were, or like the other kind of finalist was like bad, like they I think are super strong as well, but it just like Insight felt like the right one for what we were trying to do. And we were willing to sort of take less money to work with them.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And totally the right call.
And it was a good call. That's excellent. Kanika, I think, asks, can you go back over that information you collected? She's in the legal
Oh
tech,
yeah, like on
what you were looking at when you were talking to them.
Yeah, so I just created a standard spreadsheet, like just in like Google Docs or whatever, and I just would do it all. The things that I think I had were like the date that I spoke to people, the name of the individual person, the name of their fund, how they came into us. Is like there were some where like someone's like, oh, you should talk to this person, but like most of them were inbound. Who spoke to them? Almost always me, but now sometimes it's a teammate. And then like things that I asked about the fund were like just their assets under management, the specific size of the fund in question. Really, the second one's probably all that matters. Their check size, like the amount of money that they're trying to give you, what they're looking for, right? So what, like some funds are not that interested. Like Insight's actually changed what they look for, but like Insight and a lot of growth equity places only really like to invest in companies that have over $10 million recurring revenue per year. So like if they're just like not really an appropriate source of funds, if like you're trying to raise a little bit, and like so I had that. And then any differentiators for the fund, like some of them would have like again, with the example of Insight, they have this large on-site team of kind of like free consultants who will help you. Sometimes some of the places have that. They're not always free. At Insight they are. And any notes I had on the place like seemed really smart or which happened. And then I kept kind of like a column for follow-up calls. So I found collecting all that information, just like there came a point like a year and a half or 2 years later when I needed it, and it was really helpful to have.
That's great.
And I found like just as a general time management thing, like I do get like I always continue to get lots of like inbound requests for people who you'd like to talk to, people who'd like a favor, like will you talk to their friend, or someone interesting reaches out, like another legal tech founder of a smaller company, and they're like, I'd love to ask you a bunch of questions. And like, I try to help where I can, but I found the way that like to do it is just to have that Thursday 4 to 5 or whatever the slot is now, and to just like structure everything in there. Like it keeps the predictability of the week a lot better for me. And it's like a nice way that I can feel like I'm helping out, like I'm moving this stuff forward, without getting paralyzed about like, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? It's just like, sometimes it might take me 3 months to talk to someone, but that's okay in a lot of these cases.
Nah, that's great. Devshi, what have you got for Noah?
Yeah, I would, like in traditional Silicon Valley, like consumer launches, it's pretty established how to go about it. You go on Product Hunt, same with a couple of different industries, but I don't know if it's quite as established what the go-to-market looks like in the legal tech world. I would love to hear when you were trying to get literally your first 10 customers, what were those go-to-market channels that proved most helpful?
Like you just kind of like you use like a cold email is a wonderful tool, and working what you got. Like for me, I'd been a lawyer, my dad had been a lawyer, so like like you have friends who are like I've been to law school, I have lots of friends who are lawyers, and you just like hey, can you introduce me to someone at this place? And then that was like semi-successful, but one of the other tools that I employed that like it did help, and like we definitely got some early clients through that. We also got ones through like at a point, I found it was hard to sell law firms on software that made them go quicker at their work. Like we got and still get, like I think we have a better story around explaining the value now. Still not, still something we're working on delivery of, but questions around like why should we pay you money to bill less money? And one of the things that I found really helpful was engaging clients in the talk. So for example, like I had done a bunch of work with GE when I was a lawyer, and GE at the time was like, the monster company of America and very assertive with their outside counsel. And they would be like, they would have been like the #1 client for like 10 amazing law firms. And I went and like spent a whole lot of time kind of pitching them on what we did, not to use it internally, but just to pass us on to their counsel. And they were really helpful with encouraging their counsel to use. So I think that's like a little bit more institutionalized now with things like Clock, which didn't really exist, but I found like some of these going out and visiting and talking to clients, like the end clients of law firms could be really helpful. But I think it's just like, you gotta just hustle, like hustle, cold emails, cold calls, like really actually work. Like cold emailing, I would say I'm like I don't know that I was a good cold emailer before, but I think I am now like actually pretty good at cold emailing. We'll see. But like it is a legit useful skill, and you would be surprised who you can get through cold emailing.
That's great.
I was asking, like hoping for a magic pill, because 90% of my time now is cold emails, but this is affirming to hear that it's really just a hustle. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, like like one thing that I always thought about that was kind of inspiring is it's like, oh, there's this really long sales cycle with legal, right? Like people would say it's like a 9-month or a 12-month or an 18-month sales cycle. And to me, the implication of that is like, okay, so you'd better get them started, right? As soon as you can, right? Like there's just nothing to do. Some things with cold emailing, like persistence does pay off. Like I've seen a number of times when like someone doesn't answer the first email, they don't answer the second email, they don't answer the third email, like, but then maybe they answer the third email and they apologize that they were busy before. So I think that can be really helpful. Some other things that we've learned along the way, like it is helpful to get someone in the KM or IT department in a firm on your side, because in the early days, we would just do these trials with lawyers, and the lawyer would get like, they would try the software and they'd be really excited. But then like they'd get busy on a deal and they'd disappear for like 6 months, and you'd sort of reach them. Finally, they'd start responding to your emails again. And it'd be like, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I remember like, yeah, your software was like the one that pulled data out of contracts. Oh yeah, that was cool. Let me see. And it just like you'd have lost like 8 months by the end, right? And what we found is like, instead, if you can get KM or IT involved, they can really help like shepherd the process. You still need to get lawyers involved too, but the kind of combination of the two can work super well. The one other thing I could say, if you're cold emailing, like seriously, do not write an email that is more than 5 sentences long. Like if you can have it be like 2 or 3 sentences, like that's even better. Like one interesting thing I did is I created like these demo videos that were like 2 minutes long. And I found I could get, like, we spent some money to get like someone to like do videos, like promo videos that were like 1 minute or 2 minutes long. And you could totally get someone to watch like a 2-minute video with some like music in the background. But like getting someone to read like a 10-sentence email would never happen. Even though you could read a 10-sentence email in like 20 seconds.
Got it. No, I appreciate that. I think the art of the cold email is one of those, I guess, undervalued skills that a lot of CEOs need to have in their early days. So
I assure you, not even in your early days. Like there's still lots of cold emailing in my life today.
And Natalie says, cheers to you both for hustling through it, because cold outreach sucks. But it sounds like if you get it down,
what sucks more? Like having a business that like where people don't use your software. That sucks more.
That would suck more.
Well, and it like does suck, because like if people don't use your software, it's like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, does it make a sound, right? Like it's like no one uses your software, it like doesn't matter.
Natalie asks a question. There was a very good thread that I shared on Twitter earlier this week about offering some sort of a value add to that person you're reaching out to. It was a cool story about some founders getting in touch with Chamath to try and get his attention, and they did by building him a website for governor or something like that. It's a real cool, creative. Have you tried anything like that, Noah, where you were trying to get on someone's radar and you, other than the cold outreach, have you tried any tactics that provided value right out of the gate?
Yeah, like I think, so this is actually the second book that I've done, right? Like this thing is something that I think is valuable. Like it's a good, like if you're a lawyer and trying to learn about AI, this book that we just have out this week, like is an example of that. It's actually the second book that we've done. First one with like a major publisher, but back in 2015, we put out a book, like I wrote a children's book of like 256 rhyming words on just Robbie the Robot Learns to Read, which is the story of a plucky little robot who felt like learning to read and tries a rules-based approach. We were sort of fighting a bunch of people who liked rules-based approaches back in the day, and it sort of fails. And then he tries a machine learning approach and it works. And like we did that as a way to give people something. So like, I think
that's awesome.
We've never gone to the extent of like building a site. It kind of, I remember like the thing that ties to is like, I can remember people in the early days saying like, if you get this client, it'll change your life, right? And like, you know, like it'll just, everything will break from there. And my experience has been that that's not true, right? Like there's just no one client who changes the game for you. It's just like a grind. Like you got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it again. And like they matter. Like I love lots of our clients. Like they do make a difference. They've totally helped get us to where we are today. So I'm not saying like the clients don't matter, but it's like, it's not like one client, in my experience, has made the difference.
Excellent. And we do have questions rolling in. I don't want to keep you all night because I know it's later on your end. So let's get to the book. Tell us about the book a little bit. And I'm going to say right now that if you're getting me a copy of the book, which I would love, can you throw in the Robbie the Robot for me? Because that sounds amazing.
Theoretically, yes, but due to what I'll like describe as COVID-19 shipping disruption, like logistical issues, it will be hard for me to. So let's hold on.
Well, okay.
Like I think probably most likely thing I could do is hook you up with like an e-copy of the book right now, and then like in due course, I should be able to maybe give you both in autograph format. But like effectively for me to sign the book, I have to like sign it, and then someone else has to go into the office and like send it out. But Toronto's under like a full lockdown right now, so there really not supposed to go into the office to do it. So it is hard for me to get those out. Otherwise, I would be happy to. But in when things return to normal, which I hope is not that long from now, then you may need to send me a reminder. But
you bet. But yeah, please tell
so-
us about this book, which Natalie's been so nice to post the Amazon link on the Facebook group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it is. So our basic idea with this is that for a lot of like,
and for our listeners, podcast only listeners, it is called AI for Lawyers.
Yes, AI for Lawyers by Noah Waisberg and Dr. Alexander Hudak. It's published by Wiley, and it came out on Wednesday this week. So two basic things we're trying to convey with the book. One, that AI is here in law practice. Like there's lots of areas where it's being used, like there's emerging areas, but there's a bunch of areas where like it's being used a lot. Like it's a normal course of business thing, and it's either ubiquitously used or on its way to being ubiquitously used. Like this is just the way it's going to be. So like it or not, like AI is part of law practice. So that's point number one. And then point number two is that doesn't have to mean that like lawyers are done, that lawyer jobs are gone just because things are getting more efficient, that this can actually be a really good thing for lawyers. And you should take advantage, and it's like to your advantage to sort of jump on that now. And our belief with this book was just like, we don't try to like if you really know a lot about legal AI, it's not like you're going to learn new things about contract analysis or e-discovery from this book. But what you may learn is just like for legal tech founders, I can imagine you learning about just like objections we faced and how we handled them, and about making the value case for why AI matters, and like really why efficiency matters. And I think that can be really like a useful tool. Like our belief with doing the book, and we've actually seen this play out with one of the guys, like a ex-managing partner of like a very large firm, who read the book, and he just like got inspired to read more about AI, and like started reading like Nick Bostrom and stuff like that. Our idea was that if we could convince lawyers that this is just something they could care about, and that they should care about and just be thinking about, and like not be afraid of, and maybe even welcome, that they could find out lots more information. So like if you're trying to find like out what's going on in up to the minute AI, like there are, you know, there's a lot of technology news, there's Artificial Lawyer, there's you know, Bob Ambrogi, there's like all sorts of like good, you can listen to like podcasts, like there's like this, like there's lots of sources that you can do if you're trying to figure out what's going on. Like that's not what we're trying to do here. We're just like, it's not like a guidebook or anything like that. It's meant to be something that you can pick up, like read on a Sunday afternoon. It's actually like hopefully a pretty entertaining read and a pretty quick read, and it'll just give you some idea more of like why you would care that AI is here and how that might impact lawyers.
Help with some of the concepts of the overall experience.
Yeah, and one of the really great things about it, like we worked with Wiley doing the book, and they're like a more mainstream-ish publisher, right? Like, and one of the positive things about that was they really focused us on just writing a book that lawyers would like to read, right? Like before going to law school, I'd been in a PhD program in political science, and so I was thinking about it's like you put the theory up in front, like you have like the first chapter is like the literature review, like what makes things different, and then the second chapter, I think it's like chapter 3, like maybe you have like an intro chapter, literature review chapter is number 2, and then number 3 is like the theory, and then 4,
the chapters
5, 6,
nobody reads. They
7,
told you to
8
take
are
out
all,
the
like,
chapters
case
that
studies. And they're like, dude,
nobody's
they're like, you can put the theory in if you feel like putting the theory in, but like just put it at the back. And so it's like, it's basically in like chapter 12, and the conclusion has some theory stuff, right? Like other than that, it's like not in there. Like they really did help focus us on like what, you know, like starting, like when we were talking about starting the business, right? Like focus really matters. Like what you're focused on really is important. And we were focused on the right thing in this book for us, which is, I think, just writing a book that you might like that someone who bills $1,000 an hour might pick up, spend 5 hours with on a Sunday and feel that it was like a good use of that Sunday.
That's great. Devshi, any last questions for Noah before I let him go back to probably cold emailing?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if I get there. Probably should be some cold emailing next week. So not joking at all. Like,
One last question. I would love to hear if you were particularly intentional about journaling or documenting your founder journey, just like different milestones, how you were feeling at times of the company when things might not have been going well. Because I mean, you kind of recapped for us a good number of years in a good amount of detail. So I'm just really curious, like, how did you go about kind of documenting that for yourself?
like it just like, again, that fell outside the focus of what we were trying to do, right? Like my focus for a bunch of years was like getting the software to work. And then it was getting people to buy the software. And like, then it was like growing the business and getting people to buy the software. And then like actually raising money was almost never a focus. Like it was a focus for like a month or two, right? Like it like literally, it was probably like it was like probably 2 months that I focused a bunch on it. So yeah, I don't know. There's like ups and downs. Like even when your company is like big and all that stuff, there's like definitely like the ups and downs remain, and you just kind of like you get kind of calmer with that, maybe, right? Like that there's going to be times when it's good, going to be times when it's bad, and like it's still very like we've certainly made a lot of progress in the business, but it's still like uncertain how the outcome is for us, right? Like until you sort of walk off the field, you don't really know. So anyways, we didn't record that. We also like, I don't know, even stuff like we didn't even write down values as a company or any of that stuff until we were a bit bigger. Cause it does not matter. Like if you do not, like if there's like 2 of you working together or like 4 of you working together, like you just got to work and like get your software to work. And then like at a point, like as the company starts to grow, you need to be a little bit more intentional about that stuff. But in the early days, like it's literally, can you get a product built that people feel like buying, and can you get them to buy it? Like that's like the problems you have to solve. So I don't know, like there were definitely very, very, very hard stretches. Like I can remember those hard stretches. But
No, that's cool.
yeah,
No,
That's great.
nothing in a documented way.
That's great. Noah, AI for lawyers, looks like they can buy it on Amazon. Is there another place you wish that they would go and buy it, or
No, Amazon like
that
ships
works?
quickly and efficiently. So
Excellent. So
it is where I buy many books.
get AI for lawyers on Amazon. And where do people find you, Noah, if they want to be in touch?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. I think my Twitter is at NWAISB, and Cura Systems is at Cura Systems. So tends to be a little bit more of a corporate account. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and I really will try to help if I can, but it may take me a while to. And like, life is busy, but like it's hard out there. Keep pushing. Like it is. I think one reason that I decided to start the business in the first place, like besides all the other stuff, was just as I was sitting there and thinking about like leaving the law firm, I was like, oh, should I get an MBA or something like that? And it was like I had been in university for like 9 years up to that point. So I like did not think straight. And I did not think that like an extra degree was the thing that was holding me back from getting a thing. But I was also like, if I get an MBA, it'll cost me like whatever, like who knows back then, a mere 120, it's probably like $200,000 now, right? But like instead, if I just take the $200,000 that I would have spent on that and put it into this business, and like I'll probably learn a lot. And I think that's been like, even through the hard times when the business might have failed, because it could have, right? it just kind of like you realize that you are learning a lot. And I think even now there's times when I'm surprised by how much I have learned and developed over the past bunch of years. And I think like one of the great reasons, one of the things that I love most about this job is just how it, like, I don't know what the meaning of life is, but like the closest I can come to it is to like be the best version of you that you can be over that time. And I think the way that you achieve that is by putting yourself in challenging situations. And starting a business is a exceedingly challenging situation. A lot of that challenge comes through like learning through pain, right? Like things that you've done wrong, that are going wrong, that like problems that you need to solve, like spots where you're not getting traction, like you're sending cold emails and they're systematically not working. Like you're doing demos and like it's just not resonating with people. And it's like figuring out ways around that teaches you so much, but a lot of the time that learning is not through stuff going right? So I definitely, I don't know if I'd recommend starting a business, but it's like it's quite an experience. I think it's a good personal development experience, even though sometimes very hard. And
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, this has been wonderful. I don't want to keep you all night, but thank you so much for being a guest. You can find Noah at, as he said, on Twitter at NWAISB as in boy. And the company is Kira Systems, Kira, Kira systems.com. And Devshi, where do folks find you if they want to connect?
I'll say the same. Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the go-to. I won't make you spell out my full name, but my Twitter is basically my first and last.
And that is Devshi Mehrotra. And the company is justictext.com. Thank you both. Don't go away. When we stop recording, I'll give you just a little follow-up here as recording. And stay tuned, folks. We'll be back next week. Thank you both for being guests. Good night.
thank you.
Bye, everyone.